Welcome to the Nonprofit Voice, a podcast series brought to you by NonProfit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we're going to sit down with leaders of nonprofit organizations, the people responsible for paving the way for our sector, along with key technology strategy partners who are transforming our industry. Here at the Nonprofit Voice, we'll have refreshing conversations in which we will all learn more about the convergence of nonprofit and technology. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website to find more episodes of the Nonprofit Voice. And you can download all of the Nonprofit Voice episodes on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. We will have all the links down below. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nonprofit Voice. My name is Nhu Te, and I'm the editor-in-chief of NonProfit Pro, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And as always, I'm so happy that you could join us today. So on the line with me today, we have Dan Clasgens, Digital Marketing Supervisor at Disabled American Veterans, and Chris Dingus, Senior Client Success Manager at Hustle. Hey, you two, welcome to the show. How are you both doing today?
Doing great, Nhi. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Excited to chat with you and Dan. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So before we jump into today's topic, I usually get started by getting our audience more acquainted with our guests on the show. So Dan, I'll get started with you. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself, the background, how you got into the nonprofit sector, and more about DAV itself.
Definitely a story of finding a purpose, right? I think many of my coworkers at DAV share the same passion of just making a difference in our daily life. So I started in what back then was called internet marketing. I think I started in it so long ago that one of the things I dealt with early on was actually talking about Y2K. So it's evolved quite a bit over the years, to say the least. A lot of changes and evolution, but I've been at DAV now a little over 6.5 years, and it was really just a point. I was just about on my 40th birthday. A new decade of life. I don't know, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, but left a pretty comfortable life. I was an entrepreneur really for well over a decade, had a pretty comfortable thing going on, and something I was passionate about, fantasy sports, fantasy football in particularly. We did a lot of consulting for all types of businesses, but at the end of the day, I wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful, and I certainly have found that here in the nonprofit space, and found it with an organization like DAV, where we help 1 million veterans in life-changing ways every single year, and it's just great to see some of my skills, some of my things that I'm passionate about come to life in this new way.
I love that, and I really appreciate just hearing those types of stories, because I think that's what the nonprofit sector brings. It gives a sense of meaningfulness, and it's a different kind of passion because it's ultimately for social good. So thank you for sharing that. So Chris, tell us more about yourself and about Hustle.
So I got my start in the political world. Right out of college, went and worked on a big presidential campaign. Also was hoping to make a big difference in the work I do, and I was in the field organizing space, so I was always working with people directly on the ground, was kind of the face of the campaign, and did that for several years, moving from state to state, different campaigns. And yeah, it's exhausting work, 60, 70-hour weeks. But I always felt that the work I did helped bring about some great positive change. And then, after I was kind of tired and didn't think I could do one more campaign, I Hustle, this new peer-to-peer texting platform that I had used once in a campaign I was working for, was hiring. So I applied, got the job, and then started out at Hustle about 3 years ago, working with political campaigns and state parties in the Northeast and the Midwest. So I was able to kind of take that practical skills that I learned on the job and help a lot of different campaigns kind of utilize peer-to-peer texting, this new technology, and integrate it into their campaigns. But yeah, I've been at Hustle 3 years now, have made the transition from working with political folks to shifting over and working with a broad range of nonprofits at Hustle. And yeah, we work with folks from really small, like, I don't know, like 2 to 3 person teams to nonprofits to the really, really large folks and folks like Dan. But yeah, it's been great working and helping folks kind of utilize tech and implement it into their existing programs and kind of guide them in that work.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's always, I mean, for me too, at NonProfit Pro, I work with a lot of different types of nonprofit organizations as well as different sizes. Obviously, there's a smaller side and then obviously the larger side, like the one that Dan's working in right now. And it's just nice to get that experience in, and especially right now with the evolution and the fast growing field of technology, I think the sky's the limit at this point. Great. So I'm so happy to have you both on today's episode. As many of our listeners probably know, and Chris, as you know, we partnered together, Hustle and NonProfit Pro. We partnered together to produce this year's Nonprofit Leadership Impact Study. And we wanted to kind of talk through some of the key findings today and, share some of what we found, but also dive into some of the key trends that were discovered within the study. So let's just dive right in. My first question, maybe Chris, you can kick us off here. With so many nonprofits right now constrained by money, and in the study, we found that 40% of nonprofits are struggling with the lack of resources. How can nonprofits leverage other tools to help them fundraise?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. Folks are, it's been a long year. Folks are tired, been doing a lot of tough work in the circumstances of the past year. And I think kind of thinking outside the box and thinking about technologies that kind of meet people where they are. Obviously, I work in the peer-to-peer texting space, and everyone's on their phone all day, every day. And so thinking about ways where they can communicate with their supporters in a channel that they check regularly, are interacting with regularly, and also can make their life easier. So being able to communicate with lots of people in a short time frame in an efficient way is something that folks should think about when thinking about adapting new tools into their suite of products.
Awesome. Dan, did you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think we've all been stuck in situations where maybe we haven't had the best tools available. So I think during my time, not just here at DAV, but as an entrepreneur, really just maximizing the use out of your tools that you do have, right? Knowing the full features, knowing how to use them, because you really do have to get the most out of things. But I think as exciting and great as digital is and technology in general, it's also a little frustrating because things are always evolving. So as soon as you get the newest tool in the suite, there's always another one out there. So for me, what I always try to sell to the leaders of our organization is we can have great ideas, but great ideas need great tools. And the idea could be only as good as the tool. If you don't reach your audiences and ultimately it doesn't do its job. But I think in terms of making the best of what you have, and if I offer any advice, it's when you are on a limited budget, because all organizations of all sizes have ultimately budgets they manage. You really have to prioritize and feel like what's going to be the tools that are most necessary to get you to achieve the goals at hand.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. But I think what you said about just the landscape right now, it's like when you finally get that hot new tool, something else is coming out and it's maybe a lot different, it's maybe a lot better. But I think just, what I tell people when I talk to different types of organizations is like, just look at what you need within your organization and then just go from there. It just doesn't make sense to bite off more than you can chew, and then you have spent all this money on technology and you're not even utilizing it the way it should be used.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think the other thing is understand that at the end of the day, you've got this tool, and that tool is the one that you're going to use. And a lot of times when we look at it to build those ROIs, the dollar signs are what we look at first. But sometimes you get what you pay for is the expression that so many of us use, and that is indeed the case sometimes with tools. So cheapest and most affordable doesn't always equal what's going to be best in the long run. So lots of things to consider.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to backtrack here, and Chris, you said something earlier that I wanted to dive into. Everybody, nonprofits, for-profits, us, we've had a really hard year last year, and I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of people. So my next question for you both is, what other funding opportunities can nonprofits look into? And Dan, I would love to hear, if you can share your experience at DAV.
Yeah, more other ways and opportunities just to generate revenue is essentially what we're all trying to crack the nut on. I call it the ways to give, right? And coming, and we're certainly seeing it at the organization I work for at DAV. We've had a very successful fundraising program for decades now. It's been driven mostly by direct mail, and I think what you've really seen evolve on our fundraising team over the last several years is just more and different ways to give. We have our car donation program now that is just doing gangbusters, and obviously, our major gifts and bequest giving and all that, fueling it up, an increase in corporate partnerships. Now we're seeing events as well really start to take off, and even during COVID, seeing some of our in-person events turn a little bit more virtual has sort of made us pivot the way we look at those things. But the idea is let the donors donate their way. I think specifically as you get into some of the younger demographics of that donor profile, they want to do it their way. And, what we want to do is try to get there and allow them to support the organization in a way that they're comfortable with, and one that we're hitting them in places that they're at with that message as well. And we have a lot of different new initiatives, some that we're working on launching now, some that are already been launched, and it's just crazy to think about the growth and the number of ways to give, not just to our organization, but many other nonprofits dipping their toes in many of these waters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Chris, how about you? I know you work with a number of nonprofits. I know it's just like as a technology company, you offer different ways to give. What are your thoughts on offering different charitable giving options to donors?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. I think Dan brought up a really good point in meeting folks where they are. And I think that one way and one thing I've seen be way more successful in the past year is folks have started to really focus on relational fundraising programs outside of like the traditional, like please to one-time donors, reaching folks where they are. And people are way more likely to support causes when they're asked by friends and people they already know. So kind of utilizing that mindset and reaching out donors with maybe asking for them to throw a birthday fundraiser on Facebook for their friends and network, or even developing maybe fundraising toolkits on their website that they can share with existing donors and supporters, and helping give them the resources to kind of be their own fundraisers and be their own advocates for your organizations. I think it's much more expensive to recruit new one-time donors, so really cultivating those existing supporters you have and maybe upgrading them to recurring donors or yearly givers is a great way where folks can really focus on their plans for the next year and utilize those really like personal touch points like texting to reach out to those folks.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really solidifies it for nonprofits is having a good strategy in place and just using that as a guideline throughout the year and throughout the campaigns and the initiatives. But one of the things we found in the study is that over 50% of nonprofits aren't developing strategic plans for their fundraising initiatives. So Dan, I wanted to pose that question for you. Why do you think this is?
That is an interesting question. I don't know. I think you find that really in any industry. I think and nonprofits certainly are a little bit behind on the corporate side, but success just doesn't happen. You have to plan for it. And once again, playing up in the entrepreneurial world that I sort of came from, and the roots for me were grown, and that is, you always are planning the work. It's always about plan the work, work the plan. I do think at some point you have to start doing things though, rather than just talking about them. And I talk to so many young people specifically, just whatever career path they're trying to get into. And sometimes just starting to do something is actually progress in itself. It's funny. I said that about podcasting. When I first started podcasting, it was literally on an iPod. I don't know if you remember what that was, but
I remember.
I could tell you the year was 2004, and it was quite expensive to get a digital sound out of there. And I talked about it for literally months about, I'm gonna start doing these podcasts. And finally, one of my mentors said to me, well, what's stopping you? I mean, just start doing it. And I did. I just started doing them. Next thing you know, I was doing them in a closet, and, with all these podcasts. But it was great because once we start doing it, we start doing it. And I think with nonprofits and other large organizations and or even small organizations of all types, sometimes a lot of ideas get out there, but getting them off the ground is a little hard. And when you start things without the proper planning, you're setting yourself up for failure before it even happens. So I think too, the other part of that, Nhi, that I would definitely say is sometimes you have failures, but learning from them can actually help you get on the path to something very successful. It all has to start with the vision though. And back to what I said before, plan the work, work the plan.
Yep. I think that's a great point. Obviously failure is scary and no one wants to do it, but how can you grow and learn if you don't do it? And that's just like kind of failure is a gateway to success,
And the other thing is testing, right? I mean, at DAV, I mean, success doesn't happen by accident. I mean, we've had testing as a very important part of our process in fundraising for several years now. And I think, more people, sometimes, you do stumble upon things, but ultimately there is a science to it. And I think relying on those types of results, and before you go all in on something, testing the waters a little bit, getting as many learnings as you can, always can help down that path of success.
Definitely. How about you, Chris? I know you guys read the study and I'm sure you guys were also surprised at that. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, I think in terms of planning out, especially right now, we're all guilty of this too in our personal lives. I mean, I'm not making any plans for anything outside the next few months. But I think the folks I work with, especially the past couple of years, uncertainty is like a huge issue with not wanting to be too rigid in their plans or putting energy into a plan where 6 months from now, they might have to switch up every single thing they're planning on doing. And so I think that is a huge problem that folks are facing, especially with what their work looks like for the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. And so now I wanted to dive into, one of the things that I think is we've done this study 4 years in a row, and it's kind of the same trend of a lot of nonprofits aren't planning ahead and not setting out some kind of template for the year and for their campaigns. And I think they're overwhelmed by the process because they have so much going on. And, it's like nonprofits are already strapped for resources and staff. And so I think that they're not carving out the time to do so. So, what are your tips? And Chris, I'll start with you. What are your tips you can give to a nonprofit that feels overwhelmed by the process?
Yeah, and I think we definitely had a similar mindset too on our team at Hustle, with the client success team, and kind of as we've planned for the future. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the strategic planning should be a North Star about how you think about your work. And not necessarily this rigid, unmovable plan. Regardless of when you're making your plan, what you're planning for, you're always going to have to make changes on the fly. With testing, if it goes a certain way, or you have new tools or new specific opportunities, your planning should not be something that you spend a ton of time on and be super rigid, but be really flexible and kind of guide the way you think about your work and implement it.
Yeah, I agree. I think understanding your goals is the first part, right? And I think a lot of folks, when they take on a new initiative, there are a lot of goals. Maybe they're not clearly defined, but having them defined, written down, agreed upon by all the stakeholders, that's good, because once you have your goals, you can really then more easily identify where the priorities are in the situation. And I think once those are both identified, it's much easier to lay out the plan I talked about. So I think in terms of making it more digestible, and tips I would give is, do a phased approach. Some level of goal setting that's realistic. Some types of accountability at each stage of that of essence. But by phasing it out and doing it in more chunks, it becomes more digestible, I think, over time.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, it's different for every organization, right? They have different goals, they have different variables, they have different missions. So there's obviously not a one size fits all approach to building out these types of fundraising strategies. But is there any like advice, or like is there a starter guide or a template that nonprofits could use, especially if they're just starting out and they want to dive into the strategic planning bit of it?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly not a one size fits all approach. And I don't even think, the same size even matters. Each organization's unique. So
Mhm.
I think with that, even team members in organizations are unique. If you're at an organization long enough and you see the team turnover, some of that type of stuff changes all on its own. But for me, I would say I don't really have a template or a starter guide, but just try to be collaborative and utilize as much of your resources as possible. I know at our organization, we do a lot of stuff on our fundraising team, but if we weren't working really closely with our communications team and some of our external agencies and on those marketing things, and really just in line with it, then it gets a little challenging. But as you're getting into different strategies and templates, I also think it gets into like what specific type of fundraising are we talking about, right? If it's something that is more established, that there's a lot of research and there's a lot of information on it, it's really easy to find that and develop a plan around it. But a lot of the stuff I deal with, in a lot of cases, are very, very new initiatives. Like hardly any organizations are doing these types of things. So it's a different approach when you're getting into that. So I think it all goes back to like the idea of don't be afraid to fail. And when you do fail, figuring out ultimately what are the things to take away from that to help you be successful in the future will end up determining whether or not that was of use to you or not.
Yeah, that's really solid advice. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. Yeah, I was doing a little bit of research before this to see kind of what was out there in terms of resources for folks. And the Council of Nonprofits had a great starter guide that I think is a good template, especially for like newer nonprofits or folks that have never thought about strategic planning before, might want to take a look at. But in terms of like the plan that we do for our team here at Hustle and what we're thinking about, I think one thing Dan mentioned earlier is that the corporate world is like very into like strategic planning and has all of their objectives and key results laid out year over year. And something that we always think about when we start each year is first is our mission statement. So like as a team, what we set out to do over the course of the year. And then from that, we build out our goals, our objectives, and like existing activities that we know that we're going to build out, and kind of how that all ties into our mission statement and the work that we're going to do moving forward. And then lastly, we also take a look at our current resources that we have. So our team members, our tools that we utilize for like outreach and communicating with folks, and how to best implement those into our mission statement and our goals and objectives for the year. So I think would be a good place to start for folks that are just starting and thinking about this.
Yeah, and I would add to it a lot of different organizations and associations that you can join. Some of them have membership fees. I myself am a member of the ANA Nonprofit Federation on the education committee there, and I can tell you just a number of resources out there with that. On the webinars and all the tools. And then there's plenty of other great nonprofit organizations where just going to some of those conferences and even some of these virtual stuff, a lot of it's free right now, and there's opportunities to network and meet people and talk to peers about what they're doing. And I think all of it goes into making you a better professional.
Yeah, obviously last year was different, but those conferences, in-person conferences, are so invaluable because they provide you with so much content and just materials to learn from, but also the networking events. You get to meet people who have been in the field for decades. You get to meet people who are new, and they all bring different ideas and knowledge to the conversation, which I think is beneficial. And
Absolutely.
Also there's like in the social media realm, there's so many Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and they're so active because people are so passionate with what they do and they want to grow and they want to get better. And I would advocate for those types of groups as well. All right, great. So I know we talked a little bit about technology earlier, but I just want to dive into it just a little bit more. We've had such an interesting past year, and technology was the kind of one thing that really helped nonprofits survive and, maybe thrive. But I think that, Dan, we talked earlier about it, how, picking the right technology can be super intimidating, especially with all the different types of platforms out there, all the different types of brands and vendors. What is your advice, and maybe what is your kind of thought process for when you guys are picking up new technology at DAV?
Yes, it is interesting because for me, I mean, I feel like I'm always looking at new tools, right? And I think we hit on it earlier in the podcast. It's like as soon as you get something new, there's like it's just like a car. It's like once you drive it off the lot, man, it's I would say first of all is the best thing to do is to really just do as much research as you can. If you are looking at tools that you have an existing tool, and you're looking at potentially replacing that, you need to look at, make a list. Like, what are the most important things about that tool for you? What doesn't it do that you would like to have it do? Those are key things, because if you can figure that stuff out before you start looking for something, I think it will help you find something that's going to really make a difference for you in the long run. At DAV, I'm fortunate enough to where we have a department that basically helps us analyze new tools. So I don't have to worry as much about doing it all alone. And it's always good to surround yourself with people that are a little bit smarter than you in something. That's why I work with Chris on texting, right? Because you always want to try to put the best people around you. And if you don't have those resources inside your organization, try to reach out to some other organizations. Maybe ask for a list of references from that potential new vendor that you're looking to work with, of other nonprofits, so you can talk to somebody in your field and learn about how they dealt with it. Because sometimes you just need more information or more people's thoughts on things before you can really come to that opinion all on your own of what's the best. But and then finally, I would say, don't try to get yourself, and this isn't just nonprofit, I mean, this is how I look at really everything. I'm not going to try to commit too long to something that I'm not entirely sure about, right? So working on a smaller length of a contract initially, as we get back into feeling it out, testing it out, seeing how it goes. Sometimes working out those types of agreements really are helpful.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I also think that, I think a lot of tech solutions too kind of pitch themselves as a silver bullet to like any challenge that an organization's facing. But in reality, I think any new technology that nonprofits adopt should layer into their existing framework and complement the work they're already doing. And part of that is also finding a partner at a vendor that is willing to help you get up and running from the get-go. So when looking for a new tool, like figuring out like, oh, like after I commit to utilizing this tool, like what resources do you offer me to like help get started? So I think those first like few months, like using a new tool, figuring out how it works, are really important into how you will eventually develop it into your team. So I think that's something too that people should look at.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. All right, awesome. So, we've talked about a lot today, and I like to ask this question to all of the guests that come through the Nonprofit Voice. And, it can be a hard question because it's hard to pick just one thing. But we've talked about a lot of great stuff today. Dan, if there's one piece of advice that you could give to nonprofits from our conversation, what would it be?
I think it is to really let the donors know how important they are, right? To let your impact be front facing. At DAV, we help all the veterans we do. We couldn't do any of it without the generous contributions that are made from our supporters. And a lot of times in messaging on websites, social, whatever you're at, we're always so anxious to tell people about all the great things we do. We don't really put the donor ahead of that, and let them, as I said, we're already doing it now with coming up with all these different ways to support our organization. let the donor feel like they're a part of the organization. And really, at the end of the day, just stay true to that mission. And I think the more nonprofits that can do that and can show that, the more success ultimately will come for not just them, but for obviously the people they're helping.
Love that. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, mine actually kind of tied into what Dan was saying as well. I know we've spent a lot of time today devoted to talking about fundraising, but I think that one thing folks should always remember is that the supporters and donors that they're working with on a day-to-day basis are people too. With that in mind, a lot of nonprofits that I work with especially have done a lot of work in the last year, just reaching out to folks, asking them how they're doing, and not necessarily always having like a hard ask in mind with a donor support or a pledge support, but really always check in with your folks, let them know that you're thinking about them. And I think that kind of touch point always plays well in the future. So just always remember your donors.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think at the cusp of it, like the core of it, nonprofits, fundraising, it's all about relationships, making sure you're acknowledging the people who make this work possible and just recognizing them and appreciating them and just not making it all about asking for money all the time. Because, donors have evolved, and now having relationships with these donors and these supporters is more than just asking for money. They want to feel appreciated. They want to see where their money is going towards. So just keeping those things in mind, I think, is super important. So I'm glad you guys both touched on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, great. So that about wraps it up for today's episode. First, I want to thank our listeners for listening in on today's podcast. And Dan and Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure having you both on. I wanted to, extend my thank you for joining me today on the Nonprofit Voice and sharing your insights and your expertise on fundraising and relationship building and technology and leadership.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great being here.
Awesome. So on behalf of Nonprofit Pro, we will see you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. You can listen to more episodes of the Nonprofit Voice at nonprofitpro.com/podcast/the-nonprofit-voice. And remember, for your convenience, you can stream any and all episodes of the Nonprofit Voice on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify.